Welcome to another episode of New York State of Mind. Pasquale Tartaro alongside Mitchell Broder, and with a special guest today, our good friend Ben Borus. You may remember him from some of our early episodes freshman year. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me. I've been excited for this quite literally the entire week. I can't wait.
Let's go. All right, let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into the NFL. Big week of football right now. There's actually some games going on right now. The Cardinals are currently playing the 49ers. We saw the Detroit Lions get throttled by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you guys who your upset or lock is for week, I believe, 14 of the NFL. Give it to me.
All right, I'll start, man. All right, upset. Call me a little crazy, but I don't think this is as crazy as you would think once you break it down. But I'm taking the Jags over the Bears.
Okay.
So 7.5-point dogs. It's a big spread. Don't get me wrong. And the Jaguars have given you no reason to be confident, as they should. They lost 13 in a row. They have a clear path to Trevor Lawrence. They should not lose this game. However, I think we're forgetting something here. I know the Bears have been kind of nice recently, but a man by Mitchell Trubisky is still a starting quarterback for the Bears. And I'm sorry, I don't trust him one bit. And he could easily come out, have a stinker of a game, be incompetent per usual, and that be that for the Bears and their playoff hopes. So I got no confidence in the Bears. So I'll go with the Jaguars. It's a bold one, but I don't feel very confident about this Bears team.
Yeah, I could see that. Like you said, though, it's interesting because if I'm the Jaguars, I'm just doing all I can to lose out at this point. So if they were to go out and win, it would definitely be a twist in the NFL. Ben, what about you?
I was looking at the game. I was choosing between a couple. But I'm going to go with the Broncos over the Chargers this week. I think that the Broncos, when they've seen a lot, they've gotten a lot better down the stretch, I would say. Ever since that primetime Chiefs game, I thought that they played really well on defense, especially in the red zone. And that's kind of where Justin Herbert has made his money, especially in that deep passing game. The Chargers are getting back Keenan Allen, I believe, this weekend, Mike Williams. They're going to be full participants. But I don't know. I just really have liked the Denver defense. And I think both 5 and 9 teams, they're not really playing for much this year. And I don't really like Anthony Lynn as a head coach in terms of his game management. So give me the Broncos.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to take Carolina over Washington this week, just for the simple reason that every time that you think a team is going to pull away in the NFC East, they just seem to lose and make it a division again. So I'm just going to go with the Panthers here to upset Washington and sort of push the NFC East race into the final 2 weeks of the NFL season. What about locks? What are you guys thinking for this week?
Ooh. Mitch, you want to go first? I got to think.
Sure, I'll go, and call me a homer all you want, but I'm going Buffalo locking up against New England. And, earlier in the season, I would have said that, but the Patriots offense is truly unwatchable. They're pretty much the Navy of the NFL at this point. They just run the ball. They can't throw it. And Cam Newton, I love Cam. I've always been a big Cam guy, but he's done. He's washed. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He can't throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field accurately. And at the end of the day, no Stephon Gilmore. That's an issue. I mean, they just don't have a lot going for them. So I think I'm going to take the Bills over New England, especially this is a game where the Bills can kind of officially slay the beast. They've locked up the AFC East. We know that, but they can kind of have that moral victory of sweeping the Patriots the first time since 1999. So I will take Bills as a lock over New England.
Looking at this game, the safest pick that I feel the most comfortable with is Texans over Bengals, despite none of them being talented teams whatsoever, and despite the Texans having basically all their team out. Deshaun Watson is playing inspired. I do not know why, but he's pushed the Colts back to back, basically within a 3-week span. Played them really hard, and they had that one hiccup versus the Bears, but I don't know. I think Deshaun Watson, I trust Deshaun Watson over anyone else in this league right now.
Yeah, who's starting for the Bengals right now? Ryan Finley? I can't even remember.
Yep.
All right,
yeah. Give me the Texans over the Bengals. They're playing inspired.
For lock, I mean, you might think I'm crazy here, but give me the Colts. When have the Steelers shown us any good football within the past weeks?
Can we debate that?
They can't run the ball. they can't run the ball. I mean, you got Juju dancing on the field mid-game. He's going to stop doing it now because it's pissing off other teams and helping fuel them to wins. Listen, this Steelers team has not shown me anything within the past 3 weeks. for me to believe in them. I don't care what their record is. Obviously, the Bills, you can argue, are the second, maybe the first best team in the NFL right now. But losing to Washington at home and then following that up 2 weeks later with just trailing the entire game against a depleted Cincinnati team. I mean, who do they even have on their defense? And they only put up 17 points. Steelers offense is really predictable right now. I think Frank Wright will put up a good game plan against the Steelers, maybe stop that run. And I think, although I'm not a big fan of Phillip Rivers, I think he'll manage the game well. He won't turn it over, and they'll run the ball well against the Steelers, and I think they'll come out with a victory.
Can we debate this?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so for new fans or people who do not know me very well, I'm a big Colts fan. So me wanting to debate this is probably coming as a surprise. Let me tell you where I would have 100% agreed with Pat until about yesterday at 4:30 p.m. when the Colts announced that Braden Smith and Anthony Costanzo will not be playing. That is losing both your tackles going into the game. I have seen what Chaz Green and LaRaven Clark have done, and I do not trust them to go against Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. I do not like it at all. I love the Colts offense. I think Jonathan Taylor has really found his home. And Pat, I remember sharing a stat with you at least earlier in the season. It was like every time they give JT like more than 20 carries, they're undefeated. If they can pound the rock and just run with Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson, I can see them finding a way to do this. But like, there's not going to be like Phillip Rivers is going to have a lot on his hands considering he's not mobile whatsoever. And he's going to have TJ Watt and Bud Dupree or whoever else they have coming off the edge right in his face the entire game.
No, those are fair points for sure. But I will say first, Bud Dupree did tear his ACL a couple of weeks ago. I think it was against.
Wait, so it's not Bud Dupree. Who's on the opposite end of it?
I'm not sure.
But they're down to their third string guy over there because their backup for Dupree also got hurt. So I mean, listen, I think the Colts. I mean, the Bills, I thought kind of like laid a blueprint on how you take care of the Steelers. Just quick, short passing game. Get the ball out into space, and don't let those edge rushers, really come down. Because they still got Cam Hayward, still got Juan. They're still a good D, but, their secondary is not great. And the Colts, I mean, listen, they got some nice receivers. I mean, Phillip Rivers doesn't need to sit back in the pocket, throw it deep. He can just dink and dunk with the backs, with Hines, those guys, and let them go. So I actually think that if they come with that game plan, they could have some success against that Steelers defense.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it. Wait,
go ahead.
I said I wouldn't call it. I just wouldn't call it a lock because I think like if I would have absolutely 100% agreed with you if they had both their tackles in, but them not having them, especially in Week 16, I do not love. But I will say I think I told you guys this earlier in the season is like the Colts look like a great team early on. Except they had a clear ceiling, and the ceiling seemed to be however good Phillip Rivers was going to play. So it was like versus the Browns, he wouldn't stop turning the ball over. Versus the Ravens, he cost them that game. If you guys remember that atrocious tackle that he tried to make on Chuck Clark for a pick six, like that's like he was the clear ceiling. In the past 4 weeks, he has 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So if he can do that and put those kind of numbers up and overcome the adversity of not having both his tackles in the game. Keep in mind, Quentin Nelson also played left tackle versus the Raiders. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him do it again.
Yeah, quick little aside before we move on to MVP. I want to get your opinion on this, Ben, since you're a Colts fan. What do you think they should do moving forward at the quarterback position after this year? Should they draft a guy? Should they maybe try to sign someone like Dak Prescott or trade for someone like Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones? What's your opinion on that? Should they trade up in the draft? Because I think we can all agree that Phillip Rivers is not the guy moving forward for the Colts. Even though he has been solid lately, he is obviously up there in age, and he's just not the guy long-term in Indianapolis. And that roster is pretty good on both sides of the ball. They got the coach, the GM. It just seems like all they need is the quarterback.
It's a great question. I would say one of two things. I think a lot of people are saying trade for Wentz. If even Frank Reich said it himself, he's basically, without saying it, he's not going to trade for Wentz. Mm-hmm. That's an absurd contract, and they're not going to take that on whatsoever, even though it kind of makes sense. I do think they're not going to be in a position where they're going to want to trade up for like Zach Wilson or Trevor Lawrence. They're not going to be able to shell out that kind of like capital to do that.
Yeah.
So I think you have one or two options. You could sign a Dak Prescott on a 1-year deal or a quarterback like that, or you let it ride with Phillip Rivers for one more year. I said it. I said it. I did not think that was going to happen. I was going to say that week 4 or week 5. But yeah, I'd be cool if they let it ride with Phillip one more year.
What do you think, Mitch?
I think that's an option. I mean, I think they do need to have some sort of like long-term answer because you've been saying, Rivers, even though he's had a pretty solid season, this is not a long-term answer at quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, because this is a pretty quarterback-rich draft class, listen, one or two of those guys is bound to fall a little bit. And if the Colts, they're going to be drafting in the 20s. If they can move up to like the teens, they might be able to snag, maybe it's a Mac Jones or someone like that. Kind of just let them sort of marinate behind Rivers for a season. The guy that I kind of think would be fun in Indy might be like a guy like Matt Stafford if he wants out of Detroit. That could be kind of a cool pairing. Get him behind a good old line just to be on a good team for once because he's been stuck in Detroit for his whole career. Carson Wentz, like Ben said, I think it does make some sense, but who's going to pay Carson Wentz that kind of money at this point? The guy's shown that he's really nothing special anymore. So I'm kind of on the Stafford to Indy train a little bit. I think that'd be kind of a fun pairing with Frank Reich and that, nice O-lines and those weapons they got. So I think that'd be kind of fascinating.
I actually love
that. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
No, I actually love that. Stafford, I feel like never got the love he deserves ever, considering that he has never really had a good team surround him. I feel like, at least in the past 5 or 6 years, everyone saw that no-look pass that went basically viral in the end zone. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep. Yeah, it was a great play.
It was a great play, but again, he's not Patrick Mahomes, because Travis Kelce didn't catch the ball. No one was really, they did not get, if Patrick Mahomes made that, that you're going to see on Sports Center, for the next month. And no one really talked about it. So I would love Stafford to Indy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't really thought about that. Let's move on to the MVP award discussion. Earlier in the year, we saw Kyler Murray being talked about it. Josh Allen has gotten some love, but I think the two main guys have been Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, obviously. I'll just start out for me. I think you can go either way with it. Pat Mahomes has obviously had another great season, unsurprisingly. But for me, I think I would go with Aaron Rodgers just simply because I think he's doing more with less. They didn't choose to take a wide receiver in the draft or sign or trade for anyone over the offseason. So for me, I kind of think he's doing a lot with not much outside of Devontae Adams, even though Robert Tonyan has had a nice year and the play calling has helped him succeed as well. I just think that the weapons in Kansas City are pretty uncomparable to the ones in Green Bay. So I think I would give the slight edge to Aaron Rodgers, but I'm interested to see what you guys think as well.
I think Rodgers would be my vote. The only thing I hold against him and the Packers, they played a pretty easy schedule. And again, you can't blame them for that it just is what it is. They didn't play a lot of good teams this year. But listen, Mahomes is great. We don't need to really talk about that much. We know how amazing he is, but he's also got the best supporting cast in football and arguably maybe not the best, but second best coach in football right now. Andy Reid is an offensive genius, always has been. So I think it's a little hard to give it to Mahomes just because, and this might just be because he's so freaking good and the team's so freaking good, but you almost kind of expect him to play like this, to put up the numbers he puts up. It's not shocking. I think with Rodgers, the component you have there is after last season and going into this draft, what confidence was there for Aaron Rodgers? He had a kind of a less than usual season. They drafted a quarterback in the first round. There was doubt about Aaron Rodgers. And he came in pissed off, ready to prove everybody wrong. Even seeing the way he's been talking in the media, he believes in himself. He's sick of the disrespect. And I think that, I got to give my vote to him. Now, I do think Josh Allen, I don't think he should win MVP just because even though he's been putting up great numbers, had a great season, it's a little tough to give it to a third-year player, but I do think he should get some consideration of some votes, just kind of to some acknowledgement, really. But I think Rodgers is the guy that should be taking home the MVP.
I think it comes down to who I think, if I'm talking about who I think is going to win, I think Pat Mahomes is going to win. Who should win? It's Aaron Rodgers. I think you have to have a conversation of what the MVP award is. Is it the best quarterback on the best team? Or is it, if you were to remove that player from that team, what would the outcome be? And I think if you removed Pat Mahomes and put, who's their backup? Matt Moore?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and last year when he played, he wasn't too bad. Or was it 2 years ago? Last year, yeah, when Mahomes got hurt,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think they went undefeated without him too. Like, so
Yeah,
yeah, no, I was just thinking about that.
yeah. So if you were to take Mahomes off the Chiefs, they are still a playoff team. If you were to take Aaron Rodgers off the Green Bay Packers, you cannot tell me they're making the playoffs. Obviously, they have they have Devontae Adams, they have Tunyon, who's came along at tight end, but you can't really tell me that without Aaron Rodgers that Packers team is going to lock up is going to make the play, maybe even make the playoffs. Like, that's where I think that he's the most valuable player, but I think just because Mahomes is playing out of his mind, and until he doesn't, he's going to be the MVP of the league. Like, that's just how it is.
The Packers defense is also sneaky average as well, I would say. So got to give that to Rodgers as
Also,
well.
can I step in and say this? I agree with Mitchell about the Josh Allen thing. I think if there was an award for like most improved, in the sense that like the step from year 2 to year 3, Josh Allen would win, and it would be in a landslide. No one has gotten better from year 2 to year 3 than Josh Allen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You also said that there's no clear criteria for MVP. That also reminds me of the college football playoff, because it seems like there's no clear criteria year after year. It seems like every year when they come out the rankings, there's always a team that gets snubbed. Everyone's mad. So I want to get your guys' opinion. Did they get it right? They had Alabama at 1, Clemson at 2, Ohio State at 3, and Notre Dame at 4. Obviously, Notre Dame just came off of that blowout loss to Clemson. Can't say I'm particularly surprised at that result, but what do you guys think? Do you think Notre Dame deserved to be in? Do you think Ohio State deserved to be number 3 despite missing, I think it was 2 or 3 games due to the coronavirus? Do you think those games matter? Do you think they got it right?
I mean, I think it's tough because this was kind of a strange season. I mean, you had the Pac-12 and the Big 12 kind of be irrelevant, sort of from day one, which, made things interesting. Personally, I would not have had Notre Dame in. I think that they showed. Listen, their big win was against Clemson with a backup quarterback. And I know that DJ is going to be probably a superstar, when his time comes. But I was a true freshman quarterback, okay, on the road. And they won by 7. And then they play Clemson full strength, and the game's over after the first quarter. And I know that this would have never happened, but personally, the team that I would have liked to see in, again, you can boo and hiss at me all you want, I would like to see Cincinnati in there. Why not? It's a COVID year. You can kind of just see, listen, what would happen if we put a non-power conference team in the playoffs? Could they compete? Could they contend? And no one would really bat an eye on it, just because the season's been so strange, so crazy. I agree with 1 through 3. I think that was correct. I think Ohio State should have got in, even though the resume isn't great. I mean, we know from the eye test, like, this is still an elite team that can compete with anybody. But Notre Dame's resume isn't really all that impressive. And I would have liked to see just, hey, can Cincinnati, undefeated Cincinnati, conference champion Cincinnati, contend and compete with Bama better than Notre Dame will? Because Notre Dame is going to get blown out in this game. There's no question about it. So why not give the little guy a shot to see if they can do a little bit better?
Yeah, I was literally going to say exactly what Mitchell said. It's just been a strange season in college football, and especially the format they have with the college football playoffs. I actually would have liked the college football playoffs to just be bigger in general, but that's kind of where I sit at it. It's like having some selection committee make a decision based off teams that have had to like, how many canceled games have we had this season? How many rescheduled games? It just seems like it's been a weird season, so I can't really fault them for, putting Notre Dame in or not. It's like, how do you really judge games that it's just a weird season to like evaluate resumes?
Yeah, for sure. I will say the only sympathy I have for the committee is that there's never been a clear criteria put forth for them to make these decisions. We never know. It's like the MVP award. Like, we never know, like, what the definition of the college football playoff is. Is it strength of schedule? Is it record? Is it conference? I mean, for me, I think I would give the slight edge over Notre Dame to Texas A&M, but I'm with you guys. Why not throw Cincinnati in there? They're undefeated. I know their strength of schedule isn't the greatest. I know they don't play in the SEC, but they're 9-0. I mean, the fact that they're behind Florida, I mean, granted, Florida did play a tough game versus Alabama. Florida has 3 losses. Like, come on, like give Cincinnati some love, especially in a year where as you said, Ben, everything's been different. Rescheduled games, coronavirus, players out, just a crazier. Why not? Let's use it as an experiment, because let's face it, whoever we put in at 4, everyone's going to argue about it. It's not going to be an argument after they get blown out by 30 to Alabama. So it doesn't really matter. It really does not matter. For Ohio State, I think that they definitely should have been in. Although they're not the Ohio State team of last year, I don't think their defense is as strong. We've seen that in their past games. And I think Justin Fields has had a couple games where makes you raise your eyebrow a bit about who the number 2 quarterback should be taken in this draft class. I think
you really think Fields should be the number 2?
Well, I'm saying I think he's had a couple games that have made you raise your eyebrow about that, because going in, everyone thought he was going to be the number 2 undisputed, but now he's got me thinking a little bit about Zach Wilson as the number 2.
Zach Wilson in that bowl game the other day.
Yeah.
Real.
Yeah.
He was making throws that seems like he just it's like the Jets and the Jags. They could just pick which one you want and you'd be happy with it.
Exactly. I thought going into this year, I think we'd all agree. We thought Fields was going to be the number 2 quarterback taken, but after a couple of these games, COVID year or not, I mean, he's going to make NFL teams think about it at the least. I mean, Zach Wilson could definitely be taken number 2. I could definitely see that. But at the end of the day, I think Ohio State should have gotten in. At the end of the day, they missed 2 games. They would have played Michigan and Minnesota. They would have beat them by probably 20 to 30 points. Who really cares, in my opinion? They're still Ohio State. They're still a great program. Still have Ryan Day. I think they're a top 4 team. I think A&M or Cincinnati should have been number 4. But then again, the committee year after year tends to make these decisions that are very polarizing. In terms of it being expanded, I think it should be simply because I think you'll see the talent sort of be more spread out across college football. Because I think what the playoff has done is made a lot of these high recruits go to schools that have high chances of making the 14 playoff, because they want to play on the biggest stage. So you're going to see a lot of the highest recruits go to Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. If they expanded the playoff, it could potentially help high recruits choose other schools and make the playing field a little more even. But again, that's a whole nother discussion for another day. Let's transition to a team with not much talent this year, I guess you could say, Penn State football, our school. They did finish the year, I believe, was it a 3 or 4 game win streak? I think it was a 4-game win streak. 4-game win streak. So good way to finish the year if you're Penn State, but still obviously very disappointing starting out 0-5, I believe it was. What do you think is the future of this program? Obviously, they were a very young team this year, and they still have some talent on the roster. Do you think James Franklin's job is sort of in jeopardy? And what do you think that he and the program should do from here going forward?
I mean, well, I think with Franklin, listen, definitely don't fire him after the season. COVID was crazy. I don't think you can really hold a lot of coaches super accountable for how things played this season, because every team went through their own struggles. But I'll say this, though. Penn State's got to be good next season. I mean, I think there's pressure to perform for next year. He's on the hot seat going into 2021. And it comes down to quarterback, man. I mean, at the end of the day, outside of Trace McSorley, there really hasn't been much at quarterback. I mean, Hackenberg kind of fell apart towards the end there with Franklin. Clifford, who we thought, maybe not great, but good, played, the first 5 games. He looked awful. He looked a lot better towards the end of the season, but, man, he was unwatchable at times. This Will Levis situation, that's got to end, because Levis is just not very good either. That's what it comes down to, is that they haven't been able to have an adequate quarterback aside from McSorley, and they had Justin Fields. We know that story, how that goes, and what that could have done had he just stayed, committed to Penn State. But, I think that, it's either someone's got to get developed or they got to go get someone in the transfer portal. And if he can't get a quarterback, that team's going to struggle, I think, to really compete in the Big Ten and compete with Ohio State, most importantly, because although Penn State's a good team, a lot of good young players and everything, but, they're not getting the best of the best. And if you're not getting the best of the best recruits, you need the equalizer, which is having a really good quarterback. And if you don't have that, then you can't win the Big Ten. You can't beat Ohio State. You got to be elite, just like how they were in 2016. That was an elite football team filled with NFL players. Can't really say that about this current team. They got maybe 3 or 4 guys I think could play in the league, but that 2016 team had like 10, plus maybe. So I think with Franklin, again, he's got next year. He's for sure not getting fired, but he's going to bring it, or there could be some calls for his job.
Well, I work for the team, so I'm not going to publicly criticize them. However, I will say this. I don't. The Big Ten had to go through a lot of challenges this year. They, right around the time that they normally would be practicing, they found out the season was canceled. They had to basically fight to get the season to be uncanceled. They basically went into their first games. The practices weren't the same. And a lot of this for a young team where you have to adjust to this right day one, walking in on campus, and you have to worry about all these different restrictions and how you can practice and how you can go about things. That's difficult. And then not even to add that you don't get to gain confidence. You have to start right away playing Indiana, who was a really good team, week 1. So right in those beginning games where these teams start to gain confidence playing, like teams that are obviously not to their, not in their conference, they gain some confidence going in. For a young team, that's pretty hard. So I think they fought through a lot of things, and just that's where kind of the rough start came from, is the fact that I think it's really hard to adjust to practices. And I'll say this. I think there obviously seems to be a question mark if whether Clifford, he has his eligibility, he can stick around for another year or two. But I do think they are excited about the competition they're going to be adding, especially at the quarterback position moving forward. I think in terms of the recruits that we've been looking at / are already signed this past year / we're recruiting from the 2022 class. I think there is more competition to be added to this Penn State football team. I think a lot of people are looking the season almost as a pass. I think a lot of people think, if you have a really bad season, it's going to affect your recruiting. I don't think that's going to be the case whatsoever. Everyone this is a weird season. It's like, it probably should, like in some aspects, it probably shouldn't have gotten played because it seemed like people were half taking the field. Things were all over the place. So I think the future's bright. I'm optimistic. I think the future's really bright for Penn State.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. I don't think Franklin should get fired. However, I do agree with Mitch. I think there is some pressure going into next season. It is encouraging that they finished the year on a winning streak. That is something to be happy about if you're a Penn State fan. And I do think that the issues go deeper than just the quarterback position, because obviously they need a quarterback, and it would be great if they get one in the transfer portal, or if one of their recruits could pan out, because frankly, I don't think Will Levis is the guy whatsoever. I kind of hope that they stop using him in these wildcat formations, bring him into the game, because it just seems like it never ends well. And I don't think Sean Clifford has really shown us anything to make us believe that he's the guy either. So hopefully one of their recruits can pan out. But in terms of the other issues, I mean, I think you got to look at Kirk Soraka. I know it's his first year as the offensive coordinator, but man, oh man, how many times are you going to run the same quarterback draw or swing pass it seems like every drive? I think they got to get a lot more unpredictable on offense. And I think Brent Pry as well didn't have the greatest year on the defensive side of the ball. They had a lot of issues, gave up a lot of points. They got lit up by Maryland. I mean, I know, listen, again, it was a crazy year. There are some complications that should be taken into consideration, but I mean, like when you give up 30 points in Nebraska, I mean, it is concerning. So I think that Franklin does have some pressure going into next year. Obviously, you should cut him some slack with all the complications given in this year, but we'll see going forward. It's going to come down to the quarterback position, and we're going to have to see a lot of growth from this coaching staff as well. Let's transition into some basketball. Obviously, yesterday was Christmas. There was the same NBA tradition, 5 games on yesterday. I'm not going to get too specific. Which teams stood out to you, and which teams do you think are really coming to contend for that championship? Obviously, we know the Lakers are going to be great as well, but we did see the Brooklyn Nets yesterday, and they do look very impressive to start the season. So what are your takes on that? Who's your favorites in each conference?
My favorites in each conference?
Yeah.
All right, Mitchell, you want to go first? I got a little quick.
Sure, I'll go first. I mean, I think that for the West, I think it's got to be the Lakers, because they got better. I mean, plain and simple. They signed arguably the 2 best sixth men in the league last year onto their roster. I mean, how can you not pick the Lakers to win the West? The Clippers, they look okay. Kawhi got his head rocked last night by an elbow. I just don't really see anyone in the West that can play at their level when they're clicking, man. So I'm going Lakers. And in the East, I like Miami, but I just don't think they have the horsepower to take down the Nets. And we'll see with the Nets because Kyrie Irving, the vibe with him's always a little weird since he left the Cavs. So you always got to be cautious with him. However, there's no question that him and KD by far the best duo in the East, and it's not even close. I mean, those are two Hall of Famers, most likely, playing for that team. So if the chemistry gels and they get along as a team, there's no issues in the locker room. I think that the Nets should be the clear-cut favorites in the East, and I think we should see a Lakers-Nets championship come. I think I guess the summer, whenever the season ends. That being hopefully it ends, but. So that's what I think, though, are probably the two teams that I believe had the best shot at a championship this season.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I completely agree. Everything that Mitchell said, we already know the Lakers are the best team in the league. The Nets are deep. The Nets are really deep. This is a team that without KD and Kyrie went into the bubble and beat the Bucks. Like, this is a deep team. I like Joe Harris, even though he's not great on D. I still think he can shoot the ball. They have shooters. They're deep. I don't see anyone being the Nets or contending for them. I like the Celtics and the Heat are in contention, but like when push comes to shove in it's the Eastern Conference Finals, is anyone really going to take down KD and Kyrie when the lights are on? No.
I agree with you. And I like how you pointed out their depth because Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie as well. They have some other shooters and scorers on that team. They're really dangerous. And I really like Steve Nash as their head coach as well. Obviously, being a Laker fan, I want to say that they're the heads-on favorite. But I got to say, this Brooklyn team is scary for sure. They could score. They're going to be the best offensive team in the league this season. To talk about some other teams, Milwaukee, obviously, they have a good starting five, adding Jrue Holiday, but they don't have the depth that the Nets or the Lakers have because when they gave up that all that money to sign Jrue Holiday, it cost them on the bench. I think they're the best player off the bench is maybe like Dante DiVincenzo. Like I'm really not sure. Like Karis LeVert and Dinwiddie and all those guys. Plus, obviously, KD and Kyrie. KD's going to be the best player on the floor in the East every time he steps onto the floor, aside for if they're playing the Lakers. So I think, as you guys said, I hate to sound like a broken record, but you got to favor the Nets and you got to favor the Lakers as well.
I have a question for the group.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like we had talked about this earlier. Do you think that at all? I know both teams recovered in their second games, but the first games, the Heat and the Lakers were off to a slower start. And you have to keep in mind that they are on significantly less rest than like a team like the Bulls who haven't played in forever.
No,
so it's like, is that a factor that you guys think will play maybe early? I mean, they both recovered versus the Pelicans and versus the Mavs, but do you think that's something that plays a role like down as we like start the season?
Yes, but I think that the Lakers depth, because the Lakers are going like 10, 11 deep right now. Because I think that having Schroeder and Harrell will give guys like LeBron and AD some time to rest. LeBron didn't even have to play the final 8 minutes of the game yesterday. He just sat on the bench and the bench unit closed out the game for him. So I think that the Lakers are really deep and that will help LeBron sort of coast to the playoffs this year and sort of save his energy like he has done in the past. I think he'll be smart about his minutes and such. Like you said, though, it's been like a 72 game offseason, which is the shortest in NBA history for the Heat and the Lakers.
It was just the finals. Like,
yeah, it's kind of crazy how the season has started so early. I thought it was going to start in January. It's definitely something to look out for sure. I think both teams are deep enough, and I think both coaches, both Spoelstra and Vogel, are smart enough to manage their best players' minutes and sort of help guide them to the playoffs. But it is something to look out for. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something you have to consider. I mean, I think for really, all these playoff teams, because not only, did they end their season so late, but again, it was in the bubble. I mean, think about a team like the Mavericks, right? Porzingis gets hurt, and normally in a season, you'd be like, okay, well, maybe we'll have him next year. He's done for this season too, because the playoffs ended so late due to COVID. So I think that for any of these teams that went deep in the playoffs, I think you might see some rust they might be already a little like more worn out than say a team like, you mentioned the Bulls, the Knicks, these teams that, didn't even sniff the playoffs because they've been done since the beginning of March. So it's going to be a weird season. I know that the NBA is trying to prevent, resting the star players, but to be honest, I think with these teams that have championship aspirations that went deep in the playoffs last season, I think you're going to have to rest some guys and have them just miss some games because the wear and tear to have them play that many games in a 12-month span, I think it's just a little too much to ask. So I think that we might see some more guys getting rested throughout the year.
Yeah, it's actually something to looking going forward. Another question I just thought of. Mitchell had said how good the Lakers have had on in terms of an offseason. Is there another team that I guess we look back and it's the finals and we think about who got the most, who got better the most this offseason? Who do you think is going to ultimately have the best offseason when it comes push comes to shove?
You're asking who had the best offseason this past offseason?
Yeah. It's obviously very early to tell. Obviously, some teams, just like in the NFL, they get some surprise candidates and guys show up later on. But who do you think at the end of the day is going to have the best offseason?
Well, honestly, I think the Lakers had a great offseason, as Mitch said, adding 2 6-man of the year candidates. But although I don't think they're going to compete for a championship, a team to watch out for that I really like what they did over the offseason is the Phoenix Suns. I really like how they added Chris Paul. I think him, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton together will prove to be a pretty dynamic trio right there. And I think he's going to help Booker and Ayton grow a lot this year. I think that's a team that could end up being a top 5 team in the West and maybe even shocking a team in the first round. So I really like what the Suns did this offseason. I think they're going to be a dangerous playoff team.
Yeah, I would have said the Suns, but honestly, I also like what the Wizards did just because the pairing of Westbrook and Beal, I mean, that's just exciting. Those are two such explosive players. And again, who knows how good the Wizards will be this season? I know that they've been pretty awful the last few years, but it's exciting to see, maybe, Westbrook in a different scene out of Houston, maybe, that's kind of what he needs. I mean, I think the Wizards, just because the East is just so weak. I mean, outside of the Nets and the Celtics and maybe the Heat, no one else really has got a shot to win that conference. So maybe the Wizards can get in the playoffs and be competitive and maybe win some playoff games. Who knows? But I'm kind of excited to see what Westbrook and Beal can do together because those are two of my favorite players in the league right there.
Yeah. And I also want to – oh, wait, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, just because you guys both said the teams that I was probably going to say, I guess I'll throw the Sixers in there. They added some shooters, Seth Curry. I feel like they had a pretty decent offseason because I liked their coaching hires as well.
Yeah.
They're not they gave Simmons and Embiid some pieces, but ultimately I would probably agree with the Wizards and the Suns ultimately.
Yeah, before we sign off here as well, I do want to just get your guys' quick, brief takes on this. What do you think is going to happen with the whole James Harden situation? I mean, I'm pretty clueless right now, but it's just weird, and he doesn't want to be there, and we saw that he was seen out in public at some party without a mask. So the Rockets' sort of coronavirus outbreak has sort of been, I think, scapegoated on him. Even though Ben McLemore was the first player to test positive. Just what is your whole take on the Rockets situation? They do play tonight. John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins will not play. James Harden is expected to play. How do you think that's going to pan out? Do you think the Rockets wait till mid-season to trade him? Do you think they make him play out his contract and wait till the end of the year? What do you think they should do?
That's tough. I think that, listen, Harden doesn't want to be there. And honest to God, I kind of thought that he purposely violated the COVID protocols as a message to ownership in the front office to get me out of here. And I think that, the Rockets, listen, they had a championship window. It was open for them, and it has since closed. It's gone. It's locked. It's over. So I think the best thing for them to do is, frankly, to, move on from Harden and tear it all down and start all over again. I mean, it just seems like that this is a marriage that is not going to last. Harden does not want to be there. He wants to go to the Nets. or I'm forgetting the other team that he was the Sixers.
The Sixers.
Yep. He wants to go one of those two teams.
Bill was like dying for him to go there.
I don't know if it happens mid-season. But I mean, listen, I think it certainly happens in the near future. He's not going to be a Houston Rocket after this season. There's no question about that. So listen, I think the best thing for them is to move him, move some of these other expensive pieces they have, and start over, rebuild it. It's done. It's over. Sorry, Rockets, but you had your chance.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Mitchell on that. I've always been on no matter what the sport is, if there's a player that does not want to be there, he will not play hard for you. Like he will, he's not going to play hard for the team. He's going to play hard for figuring out what his next team is. So if you can identify that, I feel like I've never been in, obviously I've not been in an NBA locker room ever in my entire life. So I don't know what that is, what that's like. However, I can't imagine that it's like, people have to know that like James Harden doesn't want to be there. He's just in the locker room. So I think that's like almost that hinders an NBA team. So you got to get him out of there as soon as possible. And you can get some pieces for him too. It's not like this is just any player. Like the Rockets don't have to be losers in this scenario. They could move and get some guys in return.
Yeah, the Rockets, no question, have to trade him. I do think they should let him go out on the court and perform for a little, just because I've been seeing some terrible trade proposals. I remember I saw one from the Sixers, like Tobias Harris and like a couple first-round picks. Like that's just not going to do it. This is a guy that's averaged over 30 points a game for the past 2 seasons. I think you got to remind teams how good he is, especially given the news that has come out recently, how he's violated protocols, and the news that he sort of ran the team, that the team practiced when he wanted to practice. The flights took off when he wanted them to take off. It's a bad look for him, and it lowers his value a little. So I think you got to let him play a little, but there's no question that they should trade him. And I think it will honestly happen by the end of January.
Yeah, well, do you think that actually, like, how much do you think that plays a role in how much teams are willing to give up for him if they know all this? Like, obviously we've seen guys like Antonio Brown. I'm trying to think of, so there's obviously been a lot of divas in the league that are just good. Odell, another one of them. But like, that's a whole nother level where it's like, you have to back it up to a certain extent. Not to say that Harden doesn't, but would you think, how long does it take for teams to realize, okay, this was just like, he's willing to change to come on our team? You know what I mean?
I mean, I certainly think it does play a role. What's interesting to me is figuring out who leaked that information, because you could sort of look at maybe Mike D'Antoni, who's an assistant coach for the Nets, who maybe leaked that, because they said it was from an anonymous coach from the Rockets. So I'm not saying it's Mike D'Antoni, but just to use it as an example, maybe he leaked it and it sort of lowers his value and allows the Nets to trade for him. Like, it's very interesting, but I think it does play a role. But at the end of the day, if I'm in a front office and I can get James Harden for first round picks and a couple nice players, like, I'm doing it. He's averaging over 30 a game. Like, he's still James Harden.
Game changer.
Yeah, like it is concerning about the whole stuff about him running the team and stuff, but if I can get him and he wants to be there, like, I'm still trading for James Harden. Yeah, so is that anything else from you guys, or is that just about it?
Nothing else. I mean, I'll say real quick, Steelers, I think, are toast. I think the Browns are going to win that division. So
who saw that coming? Honestly, who saw the Steelers?
Who did? I'm telling you right now, Steelers, they're done. Big Ben, I think, is also done.
Yeah. Do you think he retires after this year? Because we've seen him talk about it like a million times in the media past year.
I don't know if he retires, but Steelers got to get someone young that they can develop. Because listen, Big Ben looked nice at the beginning of the year, but the dude can't throw the friggin' football anymore. I mean, he's not shot.
He's not, like, I hate to say it, Phillip Rivers is making more throws than Ben. Big Ben. He is. He made some really
better football.
Yeah, I think Big Ben has to hang it up. I think like he's being carried by a really talented defense and a great offensive line and 2 number 1 wide receivers carried. The Steelers need to, but maybe it's not this season, maybe it's next season. I don't know.
Hey, all I'm saying, as Chris Sims put it perfectly, with the whole Steelers, they're so broken. That's why I think they're not winning the game. I mean, they're losing out and losing first round of playoffs. He said they're becoming predictable in their predictability, And that's just what it's going to be. Everyone knows what their offense is. It's throw it to the sticks, throw it 5 to 10 yards, just sit on routes and just break on them. And so I think the Steelers are toast. I don't think I've ever seen a team just crumble so quickly and so just like depressing. Like there's no hope for them. It's just done, over.
I remember even when they were undefeated, I'm like, they're undefeated, but like they really haven't beaten anyone good. The people that their best win was the Browns, I guess, or maybe the Titans. I think they beat the Titans as well, but that was on they had to come back to win that game too. So it's like in my opinion, the Steelers had a really easy schedule. The people got way too high on them, and now they realize that they never really were as good as they panned out to be, I guess.
Hey, man.
I don't know. This game is going to be really exciting on Sunday.
Colts lock. I'm telling you right now.
Listen, I'm not doubting you. I want the Colts to. There's a scenario where the Colts go 11-5 and do not make the playoffs. That would be horrendous. So I hope they win. But also circle the wagons.
All right, I think that just about does it. Ben, we look forward to potentially having you on the show again in the future. Let's do it again next week. Totally. All right, to another great Sunday of football. We're signing off. New York State of Mind.